Welcome guys, this is Ella from Stop New channel with a video that is long overdue. I'm sorry it took me a while, but I wanted to also give myself some time to think about Life is Strange True Colors before recording a proper review. If you've been following my streams, if you've been watching my streams there on YouTube, you know that I've been discussing that game with you guys. We've been talking, you basically know what I think. It hasn't changed that much. Now I had time to organize it a bit, so let's discuss Life is Strange True Colors. Now this is my honest impressions video. So as you well know, Life is Strange True Colors is a third installment in the franchise. It's not exactly third one because there's been some other games going on in between. So we have the original Life is Strange game, then we had prequel called Before the Storm developed by Deck 9 that happened prior to the events of Life is Strange. Then Deck 9 also developed a DLC to that prequel, which was also a prequel to the game and its prequel. Okay. Yeah, basically they developed a DLC called Farewell, and that happened prior the events of Before the Storm and Life is Strange. Then Don't Not developed another Life is Strange game, which was called Life is Strange 2. It did have a prequel as well called Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, which was sort of a minor free game that was related to the events of Life is Strange 2 episode 2. Then decided to work on a game that's loosely called Life is Strange 3. Apparently it is in the game files, so it is Life is Strange 3, except they didn't actually add the number, so they just titled it True Colors, and the game has been out for 2 weeks now. It was developed by Deck 9, so the same developer behind Before the Storm. Now Before the Storm was a game loved by many, but it was also disliked by many. Some people thought that it didn't quite fit the canon, so what Life is Strange settled, sort of, the story that it presented. Some disagreed with the portrayal of Rachel. Yeah, there's been a lot of discussions going on my channel as well, here and there. Life is Strange 3 or Life is Strange True Colors was a game that we've been waiting for many reasons. As you know, there's been some criticism when it comes to Life is Strange 2. It wasn't fully accepted by the entire fanbase, mostly because it had some faults that were hard to ignore for some people, myself included. I did record an honest review, an ultimate review on my channel, so you can check it out. And I don't want to talk about that again right here, but basically there's been an entire fan base waiting for a game that would be more like Life is Strange. So maybe a game that's located in a small city, just like Life is Strange was, or Arcadia Bay. Now the game was located in Heaven Springs, a game that had some sort of mystery involved, and a protagonist that actually had superpowers of their own, because if you remember Sean from Life is Strange 2, he didn't really have any powers. He was just mentoring his brother Daniel. He didn't have any powers of his own, so we could only watch Daniel using his powers, but we couldn't really do anything ourselves. It seems like Deck 9 truly listened to the fans. It seems like they actually wanted to go back to Life is Strange roots. Like I mentioned before, they located the game in a small Colorado village called Heaven Springs. They went back to a female protagonist called Alex Shen. Now we're gonna talk about her some more later on. They presented a mystery that involved someone's death, just like Life is Strange did. They also used music a bit more than Life is Strange 2 did. Life is Strange 2 didn't really use as many songs. Also, it was a AAA title, so they basically had a lot of money and they focused on the graphics, which were stunning. Time-wise, Life is Strange True Colors happened 2 years after Life is Strange 2 events, 6 years after Life is Strange events, and 9 years after Before the Storm events. They used Unreal 4 engine again, and it was also episodic, sort of. All the previous Life is Strange games, they went for periodical release. So we had to wait for the next chapters, the next episodes. We had to wait. When it comes to Life is Strange 2, we really had to wait. The gaps have been pretty major. Deck 9 decided to release all the episodes at once. So on one hand, that was pretty exciting because it was really cool to stream the game daily for 5 days straight. It made the whole experience a bit more immersive. But on the other hand, I feel like the hype was pretty big. Then it went down a bit because it was all out there. I think the whole aspect of waiting, the speculation, reacting to the trailers and whatnot, that was taken away from us because we couldn't really do anything in between between the chapters, since they were all released at once. Now, I'm not really complaining, I'm neither here nor there. I think I would prefer monthly releases. I think a month would be like just enough to keep the excitement high, but not long enough for us to, get too impatient. But it is what it is, they released it all at once, and I'm not really saying that this is a fault. I guess it's personal preference. I will warn you when I reach the spoilery part, in case you haven't really played it yet. Yeah, we are still awaiting the DLC called Wavelengths. It will be focused on Steph. Deck 9 decided to bring back a character beloved by many, a character known from Before the Storm, Steph Gingrich. Now, she was Chloe and Rachel's friend in Before the Storm. She lived in Arcadia Bay too. People liked her a lot, and Deck 9 figured that it's actually smart, indeed it was, to bring back a character that people liked and make her a main character, so to speak. First, let's focus on the good sides of the game. I myself liked it so much. Because I preferred the original game to Life is Strange 2. Maybe we shouldn't really be comparing, but Life is Strange is still my favorite Life is Strange franchise game, so it was lovely to be brought back to a small city environment. It's definitely cozy to play in one place, to be able to walk around one place and get familiar with it, with the people who live in there. Because in Life is Strange 2 we kept changing locations, we kept meeting new people in each episode, which was on one hand interesting, but on the other hand you didn't really have much time to get used to anyone or to get to know anyone properly. Heaven Springs was absolutely gorgeous. Visually speaking, Deck 9 overdid themselves. It looked wonderful and it was a pleasure to be in there. They provided many moments of stillness when you could just sit down or lie down and listen to a song, which was lovely, and I appreciated that a lot. They also used a lot of music. Soundtrack resembled Life is Strange one, lots of indie tunes. Julia and Angus Stone recorded an album that was dedicated to the game. There were also some other bands that we were able to listen to. Overall, it was a great soundtrack. When it comes to visual aspects of the game, Deck 9 has a true talent. They are able to create scenes that are overwhelmingly beautiful. They did that once in Before the Storm. If you remember Rachel's father and Sarah's dance and talk, they've been basically surrounded by darkness and you can only see them. Deck 9 creates these scenes, they're pretty poetic, and they did it again in True Colors. So for example, Ducky dance scene, or when we were playing the game that Steph created among others and we had to fight the king, or many scenes in the final chapter when Alex was going through some memories of her own and she was listening to Dido song. It was a bit random, like it didn't quite fit the soundtrack, but I like the song. We all know the song, I think so at least. It was pretty popular, like around the year 2000 when the events of the game, Alex's memories were happening. So probably that is why she was listening to that song while watching Gabe and her father fight, which resembled an Asian shadow theater. So these are just the examples of how creative Deck 9 can get when it comes to creating visually impactful scenes. Another thing that they nailed was actually the characters. They created a bunch of side characters and you actually liked most of them. Also, they had pretty interesting side stories. I didn't have the impression that they were just there to fill the episode. I feel like they were giving some proper attention in the development process. For example, Riley, her mother that was struggling with Alzheimer's disease, which was pretty cool to mention because this is not an aspect that is often talked about in games. Ducky and his loss, what he described to us while our dance, like prior to our dance. Mark and his struggle when it comes to anger. Now, from now on, I guess I will be mentioning more spoilers, so if you haven't played the game, you might want to tune back later on. I'll try to mark the part. What Deck 9 truly nailed was the protagonist and two other main characters, so Steph and Ryan. When we came to Heaven Springs and lost our brother Gabe in an accident, we made two friends, Ryan and Steph. It was also said from the very beginning that these are both romance options, so if you wanted to go the gay route, then there was Alex. If you wanted to go the straight route or bisexual route, whatever, there was Ryan. Ryan was actually lovely. Like, it didn't feel like a fill-in character as well. It didn't feel like the game was forcing the Steph path just because Steph was brought back, just because she was a beloved character from Before the Storm. Ryan was an equally tempting path. Even for me, I always go for the gay route, but honestly I will replay the game just to check out the Ryan route because it was pretty amazing as well. Also, for many reasons, it would have made a quite complicated relationship, and that's what I appreciate, because we would have the whole history. Ryan cut the rope when it comes to Gabe. Ryan's father, Jed, turned out to be a villain of the game. So yeah, there's that. Well, all couples have some issues, right? But yeah, these are major ones. Even though we had 2 lovely romance routes available, I feel like the friendship aspect was truly shining. It was lovely hanging around with both of them. We were actually such a great trio. And I wish the game wouldn't really screw it up by the end, because it just felt like whoever you chose to go with when it comes to romance, it would have led to neglecting the remaining person. For example, for me, I chose Steph, I stayed with Steph, but it felt like they really neglected Ryan, even though he was still our close friend. For whatever reason, it just wasn't really shown as much, which is a shame. I also feel like partially they could have gone for the polyamorous route. I know that's maybe controversial. It's not something that we often see in games. It's not something that we often see in movies either. It's starting to show in some movies and some shows, like You, Me and Her, for example. Polyamory does exist. I think many people would appreciate the possibility of being in a relationship with both Steph and Ryan. Then again, I don't know how family friendly they wanted to make that game. Maybe that would have been too controversial for some people. Hard to tell, but I think it would be really nice if they decided to show that it does exist. We know that the franchise doesn't shy away from difficult subjects. Not too long ago, Dontnod created a game called Tell Me Why with a trans protagonist. So it would have been interesting to see. Maybe that was a missed opportunity to at least present that option. Yeah. Now, the true queen of True Colors was Alex. She was one of the best, if not the best, protagonist of Life is Strange franchise thus far. I don't know if it's the fact that she was in her 20s already, so she wasn't a teenager, sort of. All our previous protagonists were usually teenagers, well, late teenagers, but still. Here it was a young adult, so it was easier to relate. For example, for me, it was easier to relate to her. I appreciated the fact that we didn't shy away from topics such as, I don't know, alcohol. I just felt more mature to have a grown-up protagonist. For a change. It was nicer for me personally. She was relatable on so many levels. She was different than other protagonists too. She was more confident in a way. Obviously her circumstances forced her to be more confident. She spent her life in foster care. They made her very believable. I think a person that struggled for many years and had to sort of fight for her well-being in foster care, that person wouldn't be as withdrawn. I think that person would be able to fight for herself. We know that Alex, apart from being an awesome protagonist, also had powers of her own, and that was a power of empathy, which was pretty interesting to handle. We are able to read other people's emotions or even thoughts. It was refreshing to be able to control our powers that were easily handled. It was pretty nice to navigate them. Alex overall was a wonderful protagonist, and I'm gonna make a separate video about her, or maybe we'll be rating the protagonists. She wasn't as withdrawn, she had a sense of humor, she was pretty confident. Overall, she was easy to relate to. That being said, the game's strongest asset was actually hanging around with them, with Ryan, with Steph, getting to know other people. The final choice of the game, which is again a big spoiler, to stay or to go, was pretty whatever, you know. It wasn't as major. You can decide to stay and then leave the week after, or you can decide to go and then come back. It wasn't really major. And also, they were really pushing us towards the stay path. They showed us what would have happened if we decided to stay, which on one hand makes sense because Heaven Springs was already familiar at that point, so you knew what your life would look like. You were picking the unknown, so it just makes sense that they wouldn't really show us what would have happened had we decided to move to Berlin or wherever. However, I don't know, it felt like cheating, like it felt like they really pushed the stay path. But it doesn't really matter. As I said, the final choice wasn't as interesting. I feel like the game presented us with the most interesting choices when we were hanging around Heaven Springs on daily opportunities, like we weren't sure if we should tell Riley about her mother's condition. That was a pretty interesting choice. Or if we're supposed to or not supposed to take Charlotte's anger away. These are the moments that I appreciated in the game. We spent a lot of time with these side characters. I feel like even though it was 5 chapters, not as much has happened. Like after Gabe's death, we were basically hanging around with Steph, with Ryan, we were playing the game. We spent an entire chapter walking around the main street. And I still loved it. I wouldn't mind having 5 more chapters of that. Of hanging around with Ducky. If you've been following my stream, then you know what I'm talking about. Hanging around with Steph and Ryan together as a couple and a friend or a throuple. Or just 3 friends, you don't have to be in a relationship. I would have appreciated that so much. I really don't have to have the whole main story. Again, having said that, I appreciated the side plots the most. Time we spent with the characters, walking around the city, playing the game, being with Steph in the record store, with Ryan, in the forest, or initially with Gabe. Unfortunately, the main plot of the game wasn't as exciting. They wanted to create a mystery plot, sort of. But I feel like if you're going to do that, if you want to create a main story, main plot that's as serious, so a big corporation covering something up, you need to treat your players, your viewers, your fans as intelligent people that will ask questions and not make it far-fetched. I feel like they made it far-fetched. The whole Typhon versus City versus Alex plot, it didn't make much sense in my opinion. So we found out that what really happened was Jed leaving behind a bunch of miners and they decided to cover that up. It doesn't seem that logical. What bothers me is that wouldn't people notice that there's a bunch of miners missing? Even if they were working off the book, someone would have noticed that a bunch of miners went missing. Jed, as I remember, he came out of the mine and he said that he saved everyone, which made him the hero, when he was truly a villain. Wouldn't people ask questions about the miners that went missing? John Chen, Alex's father, among them. Someone would have noticed. That's something to think about. The whole evil corporation, like, while I know that corporations aren't usually saint, but they're also not crazy killers. Like, they wouldn't really blow up a mine knowing that there's a kid inside, you know? That was a bit far-fetched, it wasn't as logical. That aspect is just something that wasn't the strongest one. At the same time, I didn't mind as much because they really didn't focus a lot on that. It felt like they focused on Alex, Ryan, and Steph and everyone in that city, and the main story was actually like a sub-story. I think I would rate that game at 8. I liked it so much, but at the same time it's been 2 weeks, and I don't think it's as memorable as the original Life is Strange game. Like, I don't really have too many bad things to say about it, and I have many good things. I loved playing it, it was a pleasure, especially during the streams with you guys. However, it just feels a bit forgettable, or at least some aspects of it feel forgettable somehow. At the same time, it was a lovely game. I am fairly certain that when I make my Life is Strange Games rating video, which I'm going to make once the Steph DLC is out, it will be quite far up. So there's that. So big shout out to all the Deck 9 creators because it was a wonderful game. Alex was a bloody brilliant protagonist, and even though there were some faults that I listed, the game was pretty special. I will be streaming Steph DLC, of course, when it's out, so do stay tuned and follow me on Twitter because I will be announcing all the details on my Twitter. Also, very big shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. That's what I wanted to say for now. Thank you so much for listening, and do let me know what your thoughts are when it comes to the game in the comments down below. Stay safe. This was Ola from Stop Me O channel. Bye.